Sometimes the simplest words can change a life forever. James Windsor, 45-year-old millionaire CEO, thought he had everything: success, money, respect. But when an 8-year-old boy approached him in a garage with a broken toy lorry and said those words, his perfect world crumbled in an instant. Prepare yourself for a story that will make you rethink what it truly means to be rich. It was a Tuesday afternoon in October when James Windsor, 45 years old, CEO of Windsor Holdings, found himself forced to stop at a motor garage in outer London. His black Range Rover Sport had started making strange noises, forcing him to seek out the first available mechanic. James hadn't set foot in places like this for 20 years. The garage, owned by Charlie Thompson, was a world away from his offices in Canary Wharf. Oil-stained floors, tools scattered everywhere, the persistent smell of petrol and honest sweat. His Savile Row suit, worth £3,000, seemed completely out of place. While waiting for the diagnosis, James obsessively checked his phone. He had 3 important meetings that afternoon, an acquisition to close before evening. Time was money, and he was losing both in this dirty and noisy garage. That's when he saw him. A boy of about 8 years old, with dirty, disheveled blonde hair, wore a shirt too big for him, full of tears. The jeans were worn at the knees, the trainers already gray from use. But it was his eyes that struck most. Blue as the sky, filled with a sadness that shouldn't belong to a child. The little one clutched a yellow toy lorry against his chest, obviously broken. One wheel was detached. The back end hung to one side. It seemed repaired several times with sticky tape. James watched as he wandered timidly around the garage, looking for someone who could help him. Charlie was busy, the other mechanics absorbed in their work. The boy seemed invisible in this world of busy adults. Then, with a determination that surprised James, the little one approached him directly. His little blue eyes looked at him with pure and devastating hope. "Sir, I don't have a dad. Could you fix this?" The words hit James like a punch in the stomach. He remained completely motionless, staring at that little dirty face and those eyes pleading for help. The mobile slipped from his hands, falling to the floor with a dull sound. James Windsor, the man who managed thousands of employees and closed deals worth hundreds of millions, found himself completely disarmed by this simple and desperate request. Charlie approached, wiping his hands with a greasy rag. He explained that the boy was called Oliver and came here every day after school. His mother, Sarah, cleaned offices at night. There had never been a father in the boy's life, and Sarah raised him alone. James looked again at Oliver, who was watching him with total trust. For the first time in 20 years of career, he completely forgot about the meetings, the numbers, the acquisitions. There was only this boy, this broken lorry, and a request that went far beyond the simple repair of a toy. James knelt down to get to the boy's height and gently took the lorry from the small hands. His fingers, accustomed only to signing million-pound contracts, trembled as he examined the small broken pieces. For the next half hour, James found himself doing something he had never done before: repairing a toy. With clumsy fingers, but with the determination of a man who had learned never to give up, he managed to put everything back together. When he handed the repaired lorry to Oliver, the boy took it with almost religious reverence. His eyes lit up with such pure joy that James felt something warm and unknown spread through his chest. It was pride, but different from what he felt when closing million-pound deals. It was more genuine, purer. It was the joy of having made someone happy, without expecting anything in return. As he headed towards his Range Rover, James heard Oliver shout, "Thank you! You're the best lorry fixer in the world." Throughout the journey to the office, James couldn't stop thinking about those blue eyes and that simple request. For the first time in 20 years, he arrived at the office an hour late. And for the first time in his life, he didn't care at all. The next day, James did something completely irrational. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, instead of being in a meeting, he was parking in front of Charlie's garage. He had canceled 3 important appointments with the vague excuse of urgent family commitments. Oliver arrived punctually from school, running from the bus stop with his rucksack bouncing. When he saw James, his face lit up with such pure joy that the man felt that warmth in his chest again. The boy had brought other broken toys: a little car without wheels, a robot with a detached arm, a torn paper aeroplane. James looked at this small museum of damaged objects and realized they represented Oliver's entire life. No iPads or expensive video games, just small, simple things, loved until they broke. While they worked together, James discovered a world he had never imagined. Oliver told him about school, about classmates who made fun of him because of his old shoes, about his mother who always worked to buy him necessary things. The boy spoke of deprivations that James couldn't even imagine, but he did so without self-pity, with the naturalness of one who had accepted his own reality. Suddenly, James heard himself saying something that surprised him. "Oliver, would you like it if this Saturday we went together to the Science Museum? The one with all the trains and aeroplanes?" Oliver's eyes widened as if he had proposed going to the moon. The boy asked if it cost a lot, if Mummy would give permission, if it was the real one shown on television. James nodded to everything, feeling his heart beat faster. He was about to propose something he had never done before: spending a day with a child, like dads do. Charlie approached and explained that Sarah, Oliver's mother, finished work around 6 o'clock and always came to collect the boy. If he wanted to meet her, it would be the perfect moment. James looked at his watch. It was 20 to 6. His heart began to beat faster. He was about to meet Oliver's mother, the woman who had raised this special boy alone. While they waited, James continued repairing Oliver's toys, surprised at how gratifying it was to see the boy's joy for each small repaired object. He didn't yet know that he was about to have the encounter that would forever change the course of his life. At 6 o'clock precisely, a woman entered the garage. James immediately understood it must be Sarah. She had the same blue eyes as Oliver, the same blonde hair tied in a practical ponytail. She wore the blue uniform of cleaning companies and comfortable shoes, with a plastic bag containing spare clothes. She was beautiful, despite the obvious tiredness, with that kind of genuine beauty of women who fight every day for their family, without time for elaborate makeup, but with a light in their eyes that no cosmetic can give. Oliver ran towards her, proudly showing the repaired robot. Sarah looked at her son, then raised her gaze to James. For a moment, their eyes met, and James felt examined by a protective mother who had learned to distrust strangers. Charlie made the introductions, explaining that James was a good person who had spent 2 afternoons repairing Oliver's toys. Sarah studied James carefully. She saw the expensive suit, the Range Rover, the watch that probably cost more than her annual salary. But she also saw something unexpected: genuine kindness. When Oliver asked if they could go to the museum, Sarah visibly stiffened. James understood the problem. For a single mother, a stranger's proposal must sound like an alarm. James hastened to specify that he would invite both of them, that it would be an honor to accompany mother and son together. Sarah initially refused, saying she couldn't accept, that the tickets cost too much. James explained gently that Oliver had done him an important favor, had taught him something he didn't know. The least he could do was reciprocate with a day at the museum. Sarah looked at her son, who was pleading with his eyes, then studied James again. There was something sincere about this elegant man, something that went beyond the obvious wealth. Finally, she agreed, but on one condition. She would pay for the coffee in the museum cafeteria. It was her way of maintaining dignity, of not feeling indebted. James smiled and agreed. As he headed towards the car, he heard Oliver shout that he was the best toy repairer in the world. Throughout the journey home, James couldn't stop smiling. He didn't know what was happening to him, but for the first time in years, he felt truly alive. That night he slept little, agitated by a nervousness he hadn't felt for a long time. The next day would be different from any other in his life. He would spend an entire day with Oliver and Sarah.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
Discovering what it meant to be part of a family, even if just for one day. Saturday morning, James woke at 6, 2 hours earlier than usual. He had slept poorly, agitated by nervousness he hadn't felt for years. He changed clothes 3 times, opting for casual but elegant attire. He wanted to appear accessible to Oliver, but respectable to Sarah. He arrived at the museum 20 minutes early and saw them immediately. Sarah had braided her hair in a simple plait and wore a sky-blue dress that made her look younger. Oliver, clean and combed, wore his best clothes, probably kept for special occasions. They entered the museum, and James saw the world through Oliver's eyes for the first time. Every exhibition was a marvel. The historical trains made the boy's mouth drop open. The aeroplane models made him jump with excitement. The vintage cars left him speechless. James found himself enjoying this day more than any expensive holiday he had ever taken. Seeing Oliver's pure joy was contagious, and Sarah also began to relax, smiling more and more often. During the coffee break, while Oliver was enchanted by a submarine model, Sarah and James found themselves talking alone. Sarah thanked him, saying she hadn't seen Oliver so happy for months. James confessed that in his world, everything was complicated, strategic, calculated, and that Oliver had reminded him what it meant to be spontaneous. He admitted it was the first time in 10 years he had taken a Saturday off. Sarah asked him why he had done it, and James looked at Oliver enthusiastically explaining the submarine's workings to another child. He replied that his world of 14-hour working days suddenly seemed empty and meaningless. When Sarah asked if he had family, James admitted he had always thought he didn't have time for a family, or that a family didn't have time for him. But now he thought he had got his priorities wrong. Sarah told him that Oliver hadn't stopped talking about him all week, saying he had finally found someone who knew how to fix things. James smiled, replying that Oliver had fixed more things in him than he had fixed for the boy. They spent the rest of the day exploring every corner of the museum. James bought Oliver an aeroplane model, despite Sarah's protests, and when it came time to say goodbye, none of the 3 wanted the day to end. James asked if he could come back to the garage tomorrow, suddenly feeling uncertain. Oliver exploded with joy, and Sarah smiled, saying she too would be happy to see him again. That evening, James made a decision that would change everything. He called his secretary and told her to cancel all appointments for the following week, even the meeting with Japanese investors. For the first time in his life, James Windsor had discovered what it truly meant to be rich. 3 months later, James's life had completely changed. Every day, after finishing essential commitments at the office, he headed to Charlie's garage. It had become a fixed appointment. Oliver waited for him with new stories, new questions, new projects. James had learned to distinguish engine sounds, to use screwdrivers and spanners, to speak with grease-stained hands. But above all, he had learned to be a different man, more patient, more present, more human. Sarah had begun to trust him completely. Their conversations during weekends had become longer, more intimate. James had discovered her story. Pregnant at 21, she had raised Oliver working 3 different jobs, giving up her studies to guarantee her son a future. Sarah had confided that she sometimes wondered what her life would have been like if she had had someone beside her, if Oliver had had a father. James had felt his heart accelerate, but hadn't had the courage to say what he was thinking. Then came the moment of truth. It was a Thursday evening. James was helping Oliver with homework when Sarah arrived from work, with red-rimmed eyes from crying. She sat down heavily, covering her face with her hands. She had lost her job. The company had decided to outsource cleaning. Meanwhile, she didn't know how they would manage. Oliver hugged her, saying that James would help them. The boy looked at him with total trust. and James understood that the moment had come to make the most important decision of his life. He knelt in front of Sarah and made her a proposal that surprised even himself. He asked her to marry him. The silence that followed was deafening. James explained that it wasn't an interested proposal, made only because she was in difficulty. He had wanted to make it for weeks, had only sought the courage and the right moment. He said that she and Oliver had taught him what it meant to be a family, that the boy had made him discover he could be more than just a businessman, that Sarah had shown him what it meant to truly love someone. Oliver burst into a cry of joy, asking if James would become his dad. James replied that he wanted it more than anything else in the world, if they wanted it. Sarah looked at James with eyes full of tears, this time not of sadness. She said she couldn't marry him just because she had lost her job. James replied that he wasn't asking her for that reason, but because he loved her. He loved her since that first Sunday at the museum, for how she had raised this wonderful boy alone, for her strength, dignity, and gentleness. Sarah finally raised her head, eyes shining with tears and hope, and said, "Yes." James took her in his arms. Oliver joined the embrace, and even Charlie applauded from the other side of the garage. 1 year later, James Windsor was in Charlie's garage fixing Oliver's new bicycle. He had halved his working hours, discovering that his company functioned just as well. Sarah, now his wife, was 4 months pregnant. They had bought a large house with a garden, not far from the garage, because Oliver didn't want to lose his afternoons with Charlie. The boy now called James Dad, with the naturalness of one who had never known another reality. James's transformation had been total. The man who previously lived only for work now organized his day around the family's needs. He had discovered that being present for dinner every evening was worth more than any £1,000,000 acquisition. Oliver, seeing Sarah caress her belly, asked James if he would teach the new baby to fix toys like he had taught him. James smiled, promising they would do it together, and that Oliver would be the best big brother in the world. The garage had become a magical place for James, where everything had begun. It was there he had learned that being rich didn't mean having lots of money, but having people who love you for what you are, not what you possess. James looked around this place where a boy without a father had asked him to fix a toy lorry, and where he had discovered that sometimes the most broken things can become the most beautiful. Sarah approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. She was radiant, happy in a way she had never imagined possible. She too had found what she didn't know she was looking for, not just a husband, but a partner who loved her son as if he had always been his own. Charlie smiled from the other side of the garage, seeing this family that had formed before his eyes. He had witnessed the most beautiful transformation of his life, a man who had learned to love by fixing toys. James stood up, took Oliver in his arms, and embraced Sarah. At that moment, he understood that this boy had been right from the beginning. He really was good at fixing things. He had fixed toys, he had fixed a broken family, he had fixed a single mother in difficulty. But above all, he had fixed himself, discovering that the richest man in the world isn't the one who has the most, but the one who gives the most. And it had all started with a simple question that had changed 3 lives. "Sir, I don't have a dad. Could you fix this?" The answer, James had learned, was always the same. "Yes, and we'll fix everything together." Now, every time someone asked him what the secret of his success was, James smiled and replied that he had learned everything from an 8-year-old boy in a dirty garage. He had learned that life's most precious things aren't bought, they're built. One toy at a time, one smile at a time, one hug at a time. And that sometimes, to fix your own life, you just need to start by fixing someone else's. Like James discovered that true wealth isn't measured in money, but in love, you too can realize that sometimes the smallest people bring the biggest messages. If this story has touched your heart, like it has touched millions of people, leave a like and share this video with someone who needs to believe in human goodness. But above all, don't miss the next episode where you'll discover another incredible story of how love can transform the most unexpected lives. Click subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss a single story that can change your perspective on life. In the next video, 6-year-old girl sells lemonade to save grandma's house. A story that will make you cry with emotion.